Hello, everybody. Welcome to Vintage Books Live. Tonight we are live with Jessica Becker, who is the author of the Little Feet Hiking series. They are a series of local and regional hiking books that focus on taking kids out and getting them outside and hiking, but are also appropriate, I think, for other ages as well. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But Jessica, if you could just start out by telling people a little bit about the books, what they include, the areas that they cover, and that kind of thing.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you. So I have four books. I have them here in various levels of scribble. And so I have four hiking guides. The first two are for Southwest Washington. And then I have one for Mount Hood and one for the Columbia River Gorge. And they're focused on hikes that are appropriate for all ages, but I specialize in ages 10 and under. I started hiking on the trails with my daughter with her own 2 feet when she was one. And so I have hikes that are good for toddlers who need physical barriers up. They don't need rivers to run into and mountains to fall off. And then I have four progressive levels for kids to, as they advance in their skill set, they can take on harder goals and reach higher peaks and do more fun stuff, so that by the time they're 6 or 7, they could be really rocking on the trails. And if you want to stay just doing a 2-mile toddler friendly hike for the rest of your life, that's great too. I give you all sorts of tips on how to engage your kids and in the moment learning opportunities. I do a lot of research about geology and history and naturalist stuff, so that your kids can learn while actually experiencing it, because I feel like that's a lot more impactful when a kid sees a plant and then you can learn about the plant and then they can go home and think about the plant and talk about it, or learning about history and actually being able to see where it happened, or seeing a rock and being able to make a connection. So that's what my books are about.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and just say, from the vintage books point of view, one of the biggest reasons that we were excited about bringing these books in is that there are lots of hiking books. We have lots of them in the store, all different flavors, and there are other hiking books for hiking with kids. But what I really love about Little Feet Hiking is, the attention to practical details. Where is this hike, how to get there, what are things to know, but like that combination with all that information, so that a parent doesn't have to know everything. They can just have the book and whip it out and say, oh, well, this fence was built by so and so in this year, and so it's all there. And I just thought that that was such an interesting and unique combination that just makes it so that you have sort of this pre-packaged family thing that you can do, and it doesn't beyond the normal prepping for a hike. It doesn't take a lot of extra effort to make it really fun for kids too. So I'm curious, what was sort of the sequence of events that led you from going to a mom who was taking their kid on the hike and learning yourself to compiling all this information into a book?
Well, as we spoke briefly before the Zoom started, I grew up in Florida and I didn't go out into nature. It wasn't something we did. There were scary things lurking behind my house in the woods, and they tore down the woods and they put a golf course in, and then a pond right behind my house where an alligator moved in. And so I didn't spend a lot of time outdoors. And so in 2007, I just up and moved here and decided I was just going to learn to hike. And so I picked up William Sullivan's guide on, the 100 best hikes in Oregon and Southwest Washington. And I just started hitting the trail, and I made all sorts of mistakes and I learned a lot. And then I just started to become a resource for people who wanted to go out. I started leading hikes with various organizations and became an encyclopedia of hikes for people. And I was told over and over again, you should write a hiking book, because I just really dig in deep and I do a lot of research and I just love it. And so fast forward to me having my kiddo, and I carried her on my back on adult hikes. And that was good until I was rear-ended the day after her first birthday, and I wasn't able to carry her anymore. But hiking and being out in nature was what really grounded me as just a person and a mom, and it kept her happy. And so I had to find a way to do that with her on her little 1 year feet, right? And I would go online and look for resources on where to hike with your kids, and it was like the same 3 hikes or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not one that likes to do the same hike over and over and over again. I have like the ones that I look forward to every season, but I like to explore new places and see things in a new light. And so I really wanted to find places, so I just started doing research. And then I started leading hikes with Hike It Baby. I don't know if you're familiar with that organization. And then I started taking people out into new places and teaching them about what I've learned. And I learned different naturalist skills. And I became this encyclopedia of local trails for families. And people said, hey, you should write a book. And so I finally just did. And it was a huge learning experience, especially doing it with, she was 3, I think, when I started writing it. And so I think I have a unique perspective in that I've actually done these trails with a kid of varying ages. A lot of them I did pre-baby, and then now I did with a kid, and I'm able to look at it in a different way and be like, you know what? I can see why somebody might have said that was kid friendly, not having a child, but now that I've done it with a child, there's no way this is kid friendly, or
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
but you have to hold the kiddo's hand the whole time.
Yeah.
And so that's how it all started. And then I really enjoyed the feedback I got and going out and doing the scouting and the research and learning more about my neighborhood, right? The woods around me and the forests and the trails. And so I just kept writing. And
That's
hopefully
awesome.
I'm going to take a break, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in, and we have our person coming in to join us. So I'm going to admit them really quick. Hi, Kevin. So we're in the middle, and we're really glad you're here. We're going to have you leave your video and audio off for now because we're recording, but we will have you jump in later if you want to ask questions at the end. So the next question I was going to ask is just kind of expanding out, because I haven't done this yet, but I've been like toying with the idea of just like picking up these books for myself, because I love hiking, but haven't had a chance to do it as much lately, and I'm kind of going to get back into it. But obviously I'm not like in the same kind of shape I was when I was doing more of it. And so I've heard people talk about it in the stores, would this be good for somebody who maybe they're older and can't do quite as much as they used to be, or if they've got disabilities or something. And I am curious if you'd be willing to just chat to folks about, like, are there applications for groups beyond kids hiking that might have various limitations? Either they're getting back into it, or they have some kind of disability or mobility limitations, or how these books might translate to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you take away all the language around kids and little feet, they're absolutely all wonderful for people of all ages. I mean, not all of them are appropriate for folks who need assistance with access or flatter trails or whatever, but definitely like the lower level ones take all of the flatness and the not the steep edges and cliffs into account. But there's so much stuff that you can learn as an adult about the world around you that you probably didn't know. And if you read my book while you're out on the trail, you would learn something and you'd be like, that's interesting. And you might want to learn something else. And so there's nothing wrong with being an adult and doing a 1 mile flat hike, because you're still out moving your body and learning about nature and just opening your mind to something new. So I think I've been asked that and told many times that this would be really great for seniors, or even just for people getting right back out into hiking. I mean, I follow a lot of social media just because that's a big place to get the word out. As a self-published author, I don't really know of another way to economically do that. So I spend a lot of time on social media, and I find that a lot of people post about these really grand adventures, and sometimes there's like this fear of missing out on these grand adventures. But something I've learned about hiking with kids is there's just a tremendous amount that you can see on a trail, and it may not be the most exciting trail in an Instagram world, but in real life, there's an amazing world that you can see out there. And so you can do it under the guise of having a kid with you, but you could also just go out as an adult and just really pick apart the place that you're in and notice things. you may not want to play stop go, like red light, green light, like I tell you to do in the book with your kids, but you could, right? That might be fun, like with a partner.
Yeah.
So no, there's definitely a branding thing, a messaging that I could put out there, that it's not just for kids. For sure.
And do you have, I was trying to think, like, I mean, I think there's obvious things that any of us who've had kids that, you don't leave the house without snacks or water and like certain things. But are there tips you have for hiking with kids that maybe not immediately obvious to people who haven't done it yet?
Well, yeah. So snacks, obviously, snacks and water, and a change of clothes is huge, because kids get so filthy. I also live about a half hour from the nearest like store, and when my kid was little, I was constantly going into the consignment store because I kept forgetting her shoes, which I thought was funny, and it became this little joke with me and the consignment store owner that I just had to go buy used shoes every few weeks because I forgot them. But I think the biggest thing is just to prepare yourself that it's not going to go the way that you think it will. And that's perfectly fine. That like, just the fact that you got your kids out of the house and you got them out onto a trailhead, and maybe you got a little bit down the trail, like that's a small win. And so I think a lot of it's just mental preparation. Obviously you want to bring all the gear for where you're going, but I think you need to mentally prepare yourself to meet the kids where they're at, know where their limits are, or at least be open to trying to figure out where their limits are, and then push them a little bit, because if we don't push our children, they never, they can't expand, right? But knowing your child enough to know how far you can kind of push them on the trail, and then being okay just turning around and saying, okay, I'm done, that was really great. Because a bad time on the trail with a parent whose expectations are too high or incorrect because they're an adult and they don't think like a 2-year-old or whatever, that could ruin hiking for a kid for a very long time. So mental preparation, I think, is huge.
Yeah, no, and I hadn't thought about that. That's actually really good, because I think I was guilty of that sometimes as a parent too, thinking, oh, we're going to do this thing. And you get out there and you think it's this great thing they're going to do. And the kids are like, yeah, well, we don't want to do that. And you're like, but it's such a great thing.
But then sometimes you can just bring like a high reward item, rather, like if it's a granola bar or a piece of fruit that they really like, be like, you know what, once we get to this spot, or if we get around that corner, let's have a snack. I mean, so you can incentivize kids without, I mean, sometimes you resort to bribery too with candy. Like
bribery's always
I'm guilty of that. Like if there's a trail I really wanted to do, sometimes you can do that, but not all the time. It's a sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think there's a parent on the planet that hasn't resorted to bribery at some point. So what are some of your favorite memories of being on the trail with your kids?
I just have the one, hence the car accident kind of kept us from moving forward with expanding our family in that way. But I have hiked so many miles with my daughter. I don't know of too many specific examples, but I know that I've really enjoyed her setting goals for herself and kind of meeting them, or especially lately as she's kind of turning 8 now, where she goes to a place and she's really starting to be like, wow, this space is really special. I'm so glad you took me here, and so all those years, right, of dirty diaper explosions on the trail, and scuffed up knees, and just totally not making it to where I wanted to get to, they paid off. But I think I know it was really neat when she was little and watching her toddle along and be like, I did it, and I see kids on the trail doing that now, and it's really neat to see them so proud of themselves. And so those are the moments that are so special to me, I think.
That's very cool. You mentioned blowout diaper on the trail. I was going to ask you if you had some epic, not so great that you aren't, that you could actually share, not the ones that you wouldn't want to.
Well, I tell people in the books, bring a bag to carry out poo, just like a dog, a dog bag, because sometimes your kid has to go to the bathroom and our ground is too hard in the summer to dig a hole, and so sometimes the urgency is bring garbage bags, carry out your poo, it's probably a good lesson for a lot of us, but that's a conversation. I know that I hiked when she was in a carrier, when she was a few months old, I hiked along the Timberline Trail to Little Zigzag, and I was horribly unprepared for the poopy blowout that happened. And
oh God.
I ended up using gauze out of my first aid kit, and it was I remembered not to ever go unprepared like that.
You only do that once, right? And then you're like, never again. So what is like, without giving away your secret spot that you don't want anybody to know about so it won't get overrun, like what are some of your favorite like in close places in Clark County, and then maybe a couple in the Gorge or in Mount Hood that you really love?
Well, I'm not one to hide away my secret places. There's a lot of disagreement in certain circles about whether or not you should reveal your secret places, but I believe that nature is for everybody, and so I don't gatekeep in that way. But my favorite places tend to be above 3,500 feet that you can only get through, like down a really gross, rocky, dangerous road. So I have a couple of those in my books, and I'm very clear about what it takes to get there. And I don't know if people actually go to them, but I did. So like Bluff Mountain in the Yaco, or in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, and Sister Rocks at the north of the Trapper Creek Wilderness. Like those are places I love, and I don't know if anybody goes to them. But locally, I feel like we spend a lot of time at the local wildlife refuges. I do something every season. I get to go, and it's neat to go through that, where every season you go with your kids and you get to see something new sometimes, and sometimes you get to see something familiar, but that really helps kids connect with what's going on outside of themselves. So like Ridgefield, and now that Steigerwald's
opened back up, I haven't been back yet. I'm so excited.
It's very different. I mean, it's a lot of people aren't really happy about how it's changed, but I think it gives kids a really neat opportunity to see over the refuge, because it's now you're walking up higher because of the way that the levees and everything's been moved around. So kids have an opportunity to be up higher instead of looking through the trees. They actually kind of get to look halfway up.
Fun. I'm excited. When my kids were younger, their school was in Camas, and I used to walk three times a week down there, but I haven't been since they reopened, so I'm excited to
get there soon. I think it's lots of baby birds everywhere.
No, I've been trying to scope out a weekday, because you had said in your post that it was super, super busy, and so I was like, okay, well, I gotta go when everybody else is at work. That's awesome. So what you said, you were going to take a break for a little while. Do you have like future, like out there after you've taken a break, places that you think you might work on next, or are you not sure yet?
Well, people write me and they say, oh, will you write a book for Central Oregon, or will you write a book for Seattle? And I'm like, well, that's a really nice idea, but I still homeschool an 8-year-old, and I have so like I can't be doing that, right? So I have to pick places that are in somewhat drivable proximity. I like the idea of doing a Portland book at some point. I'm not there yet. That's not where I'm feeling drawn to. I love Portland. I think there's a tremendous amount of information out there about Portland hiking, but Clark County just doesn't have that much. And I mean, there's so many trails and connections to nature here, and there's just not a lot of information out there about them. And so I like the idea of continuing to focus on that. And I'd really like to, I think I might write an urban trails book for Clark County with a focus on accessibility, whether it's getting somewhere by bus line without having a car, or trails that are good for folks who have mobility issues, stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm leaning to. There's like this part of me that wants to write a Mount St. Helens book that only I would read. And I just deep dive into all the volcanoes.
I doubt you'd be the only one to read it.
But that would be more like if I had lots of extra time, which I write my books after 9:30 or so every night when I'm not momming. So
that takes a while longer than.
So that's where I'm leaning.
It's a little bit of go do this thing for 5 minutes so I can.
It's hard to do the research though in 5
Yes,
minutes. So you just
exactly.
have to focus.
Oh, I know.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna learn
those-
about this dam, by golly, this.
yeah, I know. And the little chunk, trying to do something in little chunks of time because you got to get the energy up to do it. And by then your little chunk is gone and you're like, ah. I am going to pop in. Kevin, you are welcome to pop on your camera if you want to. We are still recording. You do not have to. But if you have any questions, you could also put them in the chat if you have any questions. And then while I'm waiting to see if Kevin has any questions, do you have any favorite books? They can be just like fiction books, or you have any other hiking resources for this area, for other parts of the country that you really love, nonfiction, anything that you just love to share with people.
Well, so my last 2 books I've started to include book recommendations. And I'm a bit of a plant nerd, so there's a few books that I like. Let's see. So all of the books by David Moskowitz, like all the tracking books and the plant books by him, is like Wildlife of the Pacific Northwest. That's a really great one for learning about animal tracks and the animals that live in our area. My favorite plant guide is Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast by Jim Pojar and Andy McKinnon. It's not maybe the best book for learning through keys where you decipher information, but my brain doesn't work that way. So the way that I've learned native plants is I look at the plant, I take a photo, and I go home and I look it up in my book.
Yes.
And then next time I do that same thing. And so I'm a visual learner in that way. So that one works really well for me. And then there's a book by Les Stroud. He's like a survival guy, but he wrote this book for kids called Wild Outside, and it's about all his adventures learning survival out in the various places that he had to survive, because he was on a show, so he filmed his own show. He would drop and so but it's a way to connect kids out to thinking about how would I survive out in the wild if something bad happened to me? Because it's one thing that when we go out into the woods with our daughter, or even without her, we plan for what we call a day hike gone bad. So you don't plan for the nice sunny weather. You plan for what could happen if you get stranded overnight. And so I think it does a good job of kind of getting kids to think in a different way.
Interesting. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. I don't see any questions pop up. So I think that was all I had for tonight.
Can I give you
please
one,
go, please.
One more book.
Absolutely.
One more book that I absolutely love is called Put on Your Owl Eyes by Devin Franklin. And it's all about book about mapping and tracking and journaling, but it starts out with this this exercise and just opening up your senses and just starting to notice what's around you. So I think that's one thing that having a kid was so much slower than what I was ever used to. And I had to pay attention to everything because I was afraid everything was going to eat her or whatever. So, but teaching kids to do that is like an amazing thing. And then they can start to see things like in their periphery, or they start to notice things like, well, hey, that red thing looks out of place in this sea of green. And so that's a really fantastic books for kids to start thinking like that.
What was the author on that one again?
It's Devin, D-E-V-I-N Franklin.
Okay.
But it's got it's a book that allows you to write in it and kids can engage in it, and it's progressive. So you start out with really basic sensory stuff, and then it teaches you how to have a sit spot and to practice mindfulness out in nature, and then how to take it with you on the trail, which is a really good skill to have.
That sounds very fun. Yes. Well, thank you so much. This was fun.
You're welcome.
And just as a reminder, all of Jessica's books are in the bookstore right now. I'm pretty sure we have them all in stock at the moment. We've had moments where we didn't, but I think they're all there right now. And so you can go online and purchase them. You can come into the store, give us a call, and we'll put one on hold. And thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.